People think they're being discreet when they whisper from the side of their mouth. They think just because they're not making eye contact, that somehow I won't know they're talking about me. Even when they're able to restrain the thoughtless dribble from their faces, though, I still know what they're thinking from the 1,000 others who couldn't be bothered to spare my feelings. Disgusting child. Attention whore. They shouldn't let her out of the house like that. And of course I grin and stare back until they are more uncomfortable than I am. But I still feel compelled to write this and defend myself, so here goes. This is the story of my mother, the Spider Queen. She isn't my real mother. I don't know what happened to my real mother, but I like to think of her as an actress involved in some celebrity scandal which made it impossible for her to keep me. I imagine the death threats she received from my father, the tearful nights and the decision which would rip her world apart, and the love which made her disguise herself and leave me in the care of Mrs. Willow. The woman who raised me was part hyena and part boa constrictor by nature, although she successfully spun a mask of white lace and perfumed curls which might be mistaken for sophistication at a distance. She was adamant about the punishment fitting the crime, although I would argue being forced to drink dirty mop water isn't proportional to a soiled floor. Of course, her own son Jeff wasn't subject to this parenting style, but as she often liked to remind me, I was her obligation, not her child. Mrs. Willow was too disdainful of real work to get her hands dirty with me, though, and I wasn't afraid of anything her bird arms could hurl my way. It was Jeff who made my life there a living hell. 3 years older than me, and at least twice my weight, Jeff made a sport out of tormenting me since he couldn't hope to compete in anything else. Glue in my sandwiches and shampoo bottles, broken glass scattered around my bed, profane words cut into my clothes that wouldn't be replaced. It's amazing that a boy with his creativity and work ethic could still be failing in school. Retaliation was impossible. The slightest hint of resistance would send him howling to his mother. I think Jeff could have murdered me, and she would have still blamed me for getting him in trouble with the law. When I was 10, some of the teachers sat down and talked with my mother about my injuries, but she found it more convenient to convince a psychiatrist that I had Asperger's and was abusing myself rather than intervene with her angelic boy. It didn't help that I almost never spoke back then, but that's just because staying quiet always seemed to bore my tormentor more quickly. I spent a lot of my time hiding in cupboards, trying to stay out of everyone's way. It was too dark to read or anything, but it was quiet, and I could listen to myself think without being interrupted. If I was lucky, then Jeff would get distracted and forget about me, and I could spend a whole day sitting peacefully in the dark. Then came a weekend when I was 12 years old, when Mrs. Willow was going out of town for a spa retreat. It was just going to be me and Jeff, and I knew no corner would be remote enough to hide from him. I'd been sitting under the kitchen sink for about an hour, before I was blinded by the sudden light of the opening door. I tried to crawl away from it, but Jeff's hand latched around my ankle. "Stop being weird and get out of there." I managed to wriggle free for a second, but then he got hold again. Both hands this time. It felt like he was going to rip my leg right off. I groped through the darkness and clung onto something, immediately letting go when I realized it was the pipe for the garbage disposal. Whatever I got wouldn't be nearly as bad as the sanctioned violence for breaking her precious kitchen. Jeff was still tugging relentlessly on my leg. I allowed myself to go limp, closed my eyes, and waited for the inevitable to come. Oh shit, what was that? He let go of my leg, and I felt a rush of cool air replace his hulking presence. He was reeling back as though something hit him. Then I felt it. The soft tickle of a spider crawling down my arm. "Smash it and get out here," he said. Jeff was already halfway across the kitchen, actually trembling. I couldn't believe my eyes. 15 years old, pushing and 200 pounds. and he was actually scared of an insect. I gently cupped my hands and let the fuzzy little guy wander into them. "I told you to kill it," Jeff shouted. I let it meander up my arm, enjoying the sight of Jeff squirming in discomfort. I pretended to swat the thing, then scooped it up again and placed it in my hair. I giggled, not from the soft tickling of its legs, but rather at the white bleached horror spreading across Jeff's face. I cautiously climbed out of the cupboard, waiting for him to attack me at any moment, but he was absolutely frozen with terror. "You can't just leave it there," he finally spluttered. "It's going to bite you." But it didn't, and why would it? Animals aren't like humans. They need a reason to cause suffering. Humans only need an opportunity. Jeff followed me but remained a respectful distance for the rest of the day. What I had anticipated being the worst weekend of my life was actually the best I can remember. The spider and I were inseparable, and I named it Swish because of the feeling of its fuzzy legs on my skin. Jeff wouldn't even get close to me, and it didn't take long before I figured out how to use Swish as an excuse to control him completely. I wouldn't sit there, I'd say. Swish was hiding between the cushions. Or, "You sure you want the last donut? Don't you see the little footprints?" It was like a miracle. He locked himself in his room for 2 days straight, and I had complete freedom. First thing I did was make a fly trap out of some honey and glue, then fed Swish for his hard work. Then I got to take a shower in the bathroom with hot water and let it run for as long as I wanted without being yelled at. I even used real shampoo and everything. Swish waited for me on the sink, so I rewarded him with another fly. It was a dream to think that kind of respite could last. Before Mrs. Willow had even set down her luggage, Jeff was already spinning the most incredible lies. She chased me with it. All over the house, wouldn't leave me alone. She put it in my food and wouldn't let me eat. I had to starve the whole time you were gone. I think it's bitten me, look. Mrs. Willow had come back earlier than I expected. I didn't have time to hide Swish. After everything it had done for me, it was my fault what happened. Mrs. Willow grabbed me by the hair and dragged me all the way to the bathroom. I told her it wasn't still in there, but she wouldn't listen. She chopped off all my hair with kitchen knife, then shaved the rest of my head down to the scalp. I didn't struggle, because I knew that would just give her an excuse to cut me. After that, she tore my room apart until she found it. I'd built Swish a home out of a shoebox and some twigs. Mrs. Willow didn't want to touch it, but Jeff was howling so badly that she just dropped the whole nest in the bathtub and lit the thing on fire. I squeezed my eyes shut, unable to watch the poor creature struggling to escape. I knew exactly how it felt, wanting so desperately to get out but having nowhere to go, and when it burned alive, I couldn't help but envy it for finally being free. After her trip and that ordeal, Mrs. Willow was too tired to do anything more to me that night. Tomorrow, though, she gave me her word, like she was swearing her righteousness before God. I was going to pay for what I did to her son. "Girls with Asperger's," Mrs. Willow said as she closed me in my room for the night, "have been known to do horrible things to themselves. I even heard of one cutting off her own ear with a pair of scissors. I don't think anyone will be surprised by what happens to you." I lay awake the whole night, imagining what may be in store for me. Mrs. Willow didn't usually like to break the skin with her punishment, but between her zealous worship of her son and the wild look in her eyes, I didn't rule out any possibility. Worse than anything, though, was the feeling that I betrayed Swish. I hadn't built the house for him at all. I built it to keep him trapped so he wouldn't run away and leave me alone. It was my fault he'd been in there when Mrs. Willow found him. Maybe I should have tried to run away too, but I was convinced she would find me again, and it would only make matters worse. If I'd learned anything from living here, it was resistance always made things worse. I just had to close my eyes, try not to cry, and let it happen. I wish she could have just done it tonight. The anticipation was the worst part. If I could just fall asleep, it would be morning, and then it would pass. But no. All night long I lay awake, listening to the soft swish of little legs, no doubt scurrying to flee the house. I must have fallen asleep at some point, because next I knew I was woken by the midday sun flooding through my window. I couldn't believe she didn't wake me. I quickly patted myself down, making sure she didn't cut off anything in the night. Then I crept from my room, peering around the house. All the doors were closed. All the lights were off. It was as though Noon had woken up at all. Maybe this was part of the punishment. She knew I hated the waiting. She was just going to let the fear keep building up until I least expected it, and then knock. I gently tapped on her bedroom door. The lights were off, but the door swung open and I saw her sitting on her bed. Fully dressed, white lace straight, hair perfectly curled. She waved at me and smiled, and I immediately shut the door. So she is awake. This is just a game to her. Well, it wasn't fair, and I wasn't going to play. I couldn't just sit and wait for it to happen. I couldn't just be quiet and still forever. I was going to tell her what really happened. I was going to tell her that her son is a liar who hurts me whenever she isn't looking. I'm going to scream it in her face, and if she hits me, then all the better. At least I can let her anger out and get it over with. Opening the door again took all the strength I had. "Mrs. Willow," I said it loud and defiant into the dark room, "your son is the one who deserves to be punished, not me." Her head tilted to the side as though unable to support its own weight. She turned to face me in small increments, unable to believe what I'd just said to her. All my instincts roared at me to close my eyes and hide, but I stared her fiercely in the face. She'd burned Swish alive, so now she gets to see my fire. "He's a sadistic brat, and the more you lie to yourself, the worse it gets," I said. She stood shakily to her feet and took a step toward me. "You think you're protecting him, but you're not," I said. "Because one day he's going to go out in the real world where he's accountable for his actions." She was almost on top of me now. I was going to get it worse than ever, but I didn't even care. I wanted to fight back. "I just want you to know that you're a terrible mother, and at the end of Jeff's miserable, destructive life, he's going to blame you and hate you for it. And if you don't already, you're going to hate him right back." There. I finally said it. She dove at me, but I didn't try to run. The last of my strength was gone and my old protective instincts flared up. I closed my eyes. I let my body go limp. I told myself to accept the pain. Swish. "You're absolutely right. I'm so sorry, my love." I felt her arms around me, but she wasn't trying to choke or restrain me. She was hugging me. It was such an alien sensation that I immediately opened my eyes. That's when I saw them. Hundreds, no thousands of gossamer spiderwebs holding up her body like a marionette doll. I recoiled immediately, and she let me without the slightest resistance. Swish. The spiders were everywhere, crawling across her face, through her hair. When she opened her mouth, I saw more of them inside her, pulling the threads to work her jaw. Her throat pulsed, and I knew more must be further down to vibrate her vocal cords. "But he's never going to hurt you again. You have our word." I was too shocked to fully understand what was happening. The alarm in my mind wouldn't stop, and I still felt like I was about to pay for my rebellion. I didn't want to stare, but couldn't look away. I didn't want to go and see, but my feet carried me there anyway. I opened Jeff's room and found him on his bed. His hands and feet were bound with countless loops of spiderweb. More of it was across his face. tying his tongue securely to the roof of his mouth. His skin was perforated with 1,000 holes, and spiders were crawling in and out of them as they carefully partitioned and wrapped each piece for consumption. His eyes blinked at me, although I don't know if that was a sign of life or simply the successful attachment of yet another internal strand. I quietly closed the door and let them finish their work. So, if I seem strange to you, walking down the street with spiders in my clothes and hair, don't think I'm doing it for attention. They were a gift from someone who wants to keep me safe. I love them, and I love her for it. My mother is the Spider Queen, and she's the only family I've ever had. I'm not afraid of the darkness. Spiders don't bother me, nor do snakes or heights or any of the regular things. I'm afraid of the child growing inside me, breathing my blood, displacing my organs, until he eventually rips his bulbous head free from my body and leaves me in ruin. I'm afraid that I will resent all the pain and obligation and loss of opportunity in life, and that all that hatred will make it impossible for me to love him. I'm still more terrified that I will love him, so much that it hurts, so much that I sacrifice everything for him, neglecting myself and my friends and my art until the day when his own ambitions pull him away from me, and I'll be left mourning the dissolution of my dreams and the emptiness of my life. And then I will sit down my aching limbs and wait for the weariness of old age to erode my cherished memories and free me from this heartbreaking desire to be someone. Then I will bless the day when I finally forget to ask myself what might have been. If only I had been selfish and lived my life for me. I wasn't afraid at the beginning, though. I thought I wanted it, that we wanted it. My husband Kirk and I had just moved into our first house, and I was ready. Sure, we still fought about stupid things, but we loved each other, and that should have been enough to make him love the child too. Okay, do you want to make the appointment to take care of it, or should I? That's all he said. We'd been married a year, and he didn't even ask if I wanted to keep it. We started to argue, and then the fight took on a life of its own in that insidious way which leaves us screaming at each other about nothing and everything. I thought he was being immature. He thought I was the one who needed to grow up and quit painting. I said he didn't take enough initiative at work, and he said I didn't respect him. Before I knew what was happening, his pickup was spraying gravel in my face as I sobbed incoherently in the driveway. I didn't see him again for 4 months, which was more than enough time for me to doubt every decision I've ever made in my entire life. Then, suddenly, one night he was crawling into bed at 2 a.m., stinking like death, blubbering apologies and promises. I was so relieved that I didn't even mind that he was drunk. We were intimate as a husband and wife should be, and when I fell asleep on his chest afterward, I thought everything was going to be okay. "I'm so happy you came back," I whispered, nestled against him. "I changed my mind," he said. "I want the baby now." "He's yours," I promised as I drifted off to sleep. There was so much blood when I woke up that I thought I'd been stabbed. I rushed to the bathroom, screaming for Kirk to help me, but he was nowhere to be found. A miscarriage doesn't just plop out and leave you as good as new. The baby drained from me over the whole next day, taking my soul with it. Big bloody clots, leaving me shrieking in anguish on the bathroom floor. I chanced to see myself in the mirror, and the sight of the network of bloody trails running down my thighs was enough to make me smash my fist straight through the glass. The pain was good. It reminded me that I had a body outside of the one that had just died. I couldn't flush it. I couldn't toss it. I couldn't even touch it. I just left it there on the floor and crawled back to my empty bed. I tossed and turned for hours until the clenching pain subsided, but it was nothing compared to the pain of knowing Kirk did this to me. I don't know how or why, but when he came back last night, he killed my baby. And if my feelings in that moment were any indication, then he might have killed me too. I wasn't expecting to see Kirk again. I took myself to the doctor as soon as I was able to drive, and that was when I got my first big shock. The ultrasound confirmed a perfectly healthy, growing baby boy inside me. There wasn't even any indication of blood loss. All my vitals were strong, and I didn't have anemia. The doctor couldn't explain what happened, but finally convinced me that I had a hysterical hallucination and that everything was fine. The bloody pool in my bathroom which greeted my return told a different story. I don't know what came out of me, but I couldn't force myself to scoop it up and bring it in for analysis. I just mopped everything off the floor and thanked every god that would listen that my child was still alive. The second big shock was from Kirk. When I heard the knocking on my door, I figured he was back again with another apology. Well, it wasn't going to work. The child and I were both better off without him. When I opened the door, though, it was his father who entered with his hat in hand. I sat quietly on the sofa with him while he explained his sympathies. I know you counted on Kirk, but I want you to know that you can count on us too. No man knows what he can bear until it's been put on his shoulders, and I'm just so proud of you for carrying on without him. The poor old man was moved to tears when I said they were welcome to stay involved with my life and the life of their grandchild. He hugged me and patted my stomach and told me all about the games Kirk used to play as a child and what to expect when my boy started growing older. Finally, he said his goodbyes, promising to check in with me next week to see if there was anything I needed. I just wish Kirk was still around to see him grow up, he said as he was leaving. I didn't want anything more to do with Kirk, but I was so touched by his father's sincerity that I still extended the offer. Tell Kirk that he's welcome to meet the baby too, I said, even if he won't be a father to him. Kirk's father gave a hard-pressed smile. I think he'd like that. The funeral is this Sunday, so I hope you and that baby will come say goodbye. The words didn't register until after the door had closed. Kirk hadn't just left us. He'd left everything. It had only been 2 days previous when I'd seen him last, but I'd kept that meeting a secret until now. Everyone else at the funeral was convinced that he'd put a shotgun in his mouth 2 weeks ago. Whatever had visited and been with me that night had told me it wanted the baby now, but it wasn't Kirk. That's when I started to become afraid of the child growing inside of me. I can't shake the thought that the stuff pouring out onto the bathroom floor, that was my real child from the real Kirk. What was now growing inside me, that must have come from the visitor. So, there I was, left wondering what I'm more afraid of. That the child will be too horrible to let live, or that he is so beautiful that my life will be the one ending that day. It was too late to get it taken care of, but I don't think I would have done it even if I could. It wasn't until I was well into my 8th month of pregnancy when I heard the 2 a.m. knocking again. I lay in bed trembling, holding my breath, wondering if it would just go away. No, there it was again. Hard, insistent pounding, like something that would break the door in if I kept it waiting. I know you're in there. It was Kirk's voice. I would still recognize it, even if I didn't hear it again for 50 years. Go away. I regretted it the moment I replied. An hour passed in the next few seconds of silence. As gut-wrenching as the stillness was, the sound of the opening door was worse. He was inside the house, but the thought of getting out of bed and confronting him, that was unthinkable. I got out of bed to grab my phone from the nightstand and called the police instead. I need help, I blurted into the phone. Someone's in my house and... Did you make him a promise? It was Kirk's voice on the line. My fingers were shaking so badly I couldn't even hang up. I just threw the phone across the room and jumped back into bed. This was all a bad dream. It was another hysterical hallucination. I just had to go back to sleep but how was I supposed to sleep when I heard footsteps climbing the stairs? What promise did you make me? Kirk's voice was right outside my bedroom now. I couldn't answer him. I could barely breathe. I should have tried harder, though, because when the door opened, it was even harder to think straight. Kirk was standing in the doorway. Only half of his face was now missing from where the shotgun bullet entered his mouth. Had he looked like this the last time we were making love? It had been so dark, but the stench of death seemed all too familiar. There is no baby, I forced myself to say. He hasn't been born yet. I don't care. He's mine. The malodorous atmosphere engulfed me, and I could taste it like rotten cabbage dripping down the back of my throat. He was getting closer, but still blocked the only door out. "You'll kill me if you take him now," I told him. "Please wait, at least until he's born." I don't care. I want my son." He lifted his stiff limbs with his hands to clamber into the bed beside me. I didn't see any weapon, but the thought of him trying to pull the child out of me with his rotting hands was even more terrifying. I gagged so violently that I would have fallen over if his hands hadn't clutched my shoulders. The icy nails sank into my arms, and I forced myself not to watch as I felt some of his own decaying skin slide off to splatter across my bed. Those disgusting fingers. I had placed a ring upon one and sworn my love before my family and before God. That open wound disguised as a face. I did not know myself until I whispered my secrets to him and washed myself with his acceptance and support. If I closed my eyes, the arms that clenched around me could almost still have been the ones that held me every night as I fell asleep. "Do you still love me?" I asked what used to be my husband. "Does it matter? You can't love me in return." If I could. Every word I spoke carried the weight of my life and the life of my child. "Would you still love me back?" "You can't. If you could, I never would have left." "You still do, or you never would have come back." Mothers make sacrifices for their child. That has been documented across eons of history, cultures, and even species. Kissing him wasn't for my child, though. I did it to save my own life. In that moment, I would have ripped my own baby boy from my body and handed it to him if I could escape unharmed. I must be the worst mother in the world, because when Kirk was done with me that night, I still promised to give him the child when he was born. It's amazing how much my mind changed after I held my boy for the first time. Suddenly, he wasn't just a medical condition which needed to be resolved. He was more a part of me now than he was inside me, and I finally understand that living for him wouldn't be a sacrifice. He is my soul, and everything that I do for him, I do for me. I know I've been selfish with my love. I know I've made promises which I don't intend to keep. I know I've lied to what was left of my husband when I pleaded for my life. But now I truly have something worth living and dying for, and I'm not going to give him up no matter what happens. Until then, I am doing the best I can getting by as a new parent who can't seem to get any sleep. It's not the baby keeping me up, though. It's just the waiting for the 2 a.m. knock on my door. "Run away, or you will die tonight." That's what I heard from beside me at 2 a.m. "What did you say?" I asked my husband. He didn't answer. Good, then it wasn't important. I had to use the bathroom anyway, but nestled under a down comforter with our tabby cat Meeps snuggled between us made me seriously consider my options. Wet the bed? Too sticky. Excavate myself from the pile of blankets and face the cold, hard bathroom tiles? Please no. Hold it in and develop a weak bladder? Hey, we were all going to get old and fall apart someday anyway. I had no intention of getting out of that bed for anything short of a nuclear strike. Just when I started flirting with the other side of consciousness, though, I heard it again. Run away, or you will die tonight. Wake up, Jordan. I'm having a bad dream. I sat up and shook my husband's shoulder. He grunted and half-heartedly pushed my hand away. That should do the trick, but as long as I was up, I uprooted Meeps and climbed out of bed. He gave me that "how dare you, peasant" expression that all cats have mastered without parallel. I was halfway to the bathroom and wondering if I could teach myself to piss while sleepwalking when "run away" or I stopped and rubbed my eyes. That wasn't my husband's voice. It wasn't coming from my bed at all. That was unmistakably from inside my closet. Don't get me wrong, I'm a strong, independent woman. I kill my own spiders and everything, but there's no decent-minded person anywhere who could hear that without screaming bloody murder. It wasn't really a scream, more of a "what the thunder flicking fuck was that?" But it was loud enough to get Jordan on his feet in a second. It was so cute how protective he was of me. My father never approved of him because Jordan had a cocaine trouble as a teenager, but to me, he had always been the perfect man. "What's going on? Are you all right?" Jordan asked. "There's someone here," I replied with the same wide-eyed sincerity a 4-year-old might muster regarding the monster under her bed. "Honey, come back to bed. There isn't anyone." "Run away, or you will die tonight." "There," I said. "It's coming from the closet." I didn't hear anything. "Check it for me, please, please." I gave him my best impersonation of a desperate puppy. He sighed and headed for the door. "Don't, I changed my mind," I said. "There's a murderer inside." "I wouldn't worry," he replied. "It's probably just my laptop randomly unpausing a video or something. Besides, if it was a murderer, he'd just kill us in our sleep." Real reassuring. Thanks. Jordan opened the door, but his body was blocking my view. I hopped around on my toes to peer over his shoulder. My doll, my angel doll, the one I'd had since I was a baby, was lying on the ground. I rushed to pick her up, reverently cradling her and completely forgetting about the monster for a moment. She wasn't really an angel, just a Raggedy Ann doll with little cloth wings sewn onto her back. But she was mine. In the same way as my hair was brown or my skin was fair, she was part of me. "Well, there's nothing in here, so I'm going back to bed," Jordan said, slumping off across the floor. "What do you think knocked her off the shelf, though?" I asked. "And look, her stomach is all ripped open." "I'll call a doctor in the morning. Good night." He was already consumed by the indistinguishable blanket blob. I sat there on the floor holding my doll. We were inseparable when I was a kid. This doll had endured everything, including a part-time gig as a bulldog's chew toy and the lead investigator of a vacuum's inside. She had been ripped, stained, shredded, and impaled a dozen odd times, and Dad had always been able to fix her for me before. Of course, now that he was gone, I would have to learn to fix it myself, but that was okay. When I have a kid of my own, they'll probably need me to fix it for them too. I gently poked the leaking fluff back into the doll's chest cavity and shit snacks. Something stung my finger, prompting its quick passage to my mouth. Was something in there? I opened the doll a little further, careful not to lose any of the precious stuffing, and pulled out a tightly folded sheet of paper. I recognized the handwriting immediately. "Dear Amelie." It was the same handwriting with the same loopy -D I had seen every year on my birthday card. Every year, except this one, anyway. I sat cross-legged on the floor, and Meeps wiggled her way into my lap while I read my father's secret letter. "Dear Amelie, the telling of an adventure becomes an adventure in itself. Fantasies will unburden your spirit from the constraints of reality, and horror is as thrilling for the author as it is for the reader. But my story is not so easily told. Every time I try to bleed my memories free, I am frozen with helpless shame and guilt. The events of my youth have haunted me throughout my life, and I fear I will not go quietly into death until I've found peace in their recounting. I hope you will forgive me for inscribing my story in verse. It is the only way I know how to distance myself from the pain and turn the tragedy of my life into something beautiful. I hope before the end of your days you too will find a way to burn your darkness with such brilliant fire as to illuminate the way for others. Forever yours, Dad. It should be said right at the start, all happy families are the same. For joys are shared in equal parts, though misery is unique in blame. It comes in many varied forms, but you will know it when it's seen. When the perfect mask is torn and sundered at the seams. So it was when I was young, a son first and child after. Playing with father was endless fun, and every shared moment laughter. I learned how to view the world from astride my father's knee. And when the night left me curled, his stories would bring sleep. But life is heavier for some than others, and it pressed hard upon this man. A war waged between him and my mother. He stopped trying and simply ran. I was left to wondering where my father went at night. Then, home late with blundering, too much drink had made him fight. One night, the drink brought a rage that I had never seen before. The beatings could not be assuaged, so out I fled through kitchen door. I wandered the streets very late, hiding from that awful noise, not knowing it was my fate to find salvation in a toy. Tossed upon garbage and refuse, the broken doll of an angel lay. It was worn deep from overuse, but I still took her home to play. When the violence was lit by booze, I held it to keep my fears at bay. Then finally, when came a truce, I would thank her when I prayed. The quiet never lasted, nor the peace, and I kept the doll close beside. Once I was too bruised to sleep and waited instead to finally die. Instead, the doll began to speak, telling me that I was safe, that even when the world was bleak, I must trust the doll with faith. The doll offered more than reality and proved my great escape. It would sing tales of fantasy, of villains, heroes and their capes, beasts and monsters with their fangs, of highwaymen and roaming gangs, who were locked up tight with a clang, prevailing justice when she sang. Since then, we never parted ways. Where I went, the doll followed after. She sat beside me when I played, or sheltered me in the attic rafters. The doll peeked from my bag at school. The other children laughed, I know, but I didn't mind the jeering fools who didn't know how to take a blow. I wish my mother had a doll to take away her pain, to free her back against the wall and cease the falling of the cane. I offered the angel doll to her, but she insisted that I keep, saying it was too late to deter the wounds which cut too deep. One night her screaming wouldn't end, and I offered up a solemn plea. That even this hurt would mend, I begged the angel answer me. No comfort, now like in the past, the doll offered this foresight. "Run away," she said at last, "or you will die tonight." I stopped reading. I was so tired, I had completely forgotten about what made me get out of bed in the first place. I stared at the coarse face with its black sewn-on buttons and flame of red hair. It was just a doll, the same doll it had always been. "Jordan?" My voice was timid. I shouldn't wake him up again. It was stupid to think. "Yeah? Do you trust me?" "Of course, honey. What are you still doing up?" "I want to get out of the house now." The pile of blankets slouched aside and he sat up to stare at me. He looked at the letter in my hands, then nodded. He put on his robe and handed me mine, and we walked out the front door in silence. Where are we going?" "Away," I said. "Can you drive?" It was like he could sense when something was important to me. He smiled and nodded. We didn't need words. I hopped into the passenger seat and flipped on the reading light to finish the letter while he drove. "Run away," she said at last, "or you will die tonight." I grew angry and yelled louder, but no other sound came out her. I flung her from my window seat, out of the house, into the street, telling her she was no good if the angel no longer could speak and tell me calming tales drowning out the fighting whales. Mother was in pain, a bestial yelp through the thin-walled home. I couldn't face my fear and help. I couldn't bear the sound alone. I ran until I was out of breath, far away from here. I didn't care if I met my death. I willed to disappear. Snow and bitter winds cut in, probing through my jacket thin. I leaned against a tree to rest, yet dared not chance to sleep unless I would waken to find myself alone in the world with no one else, or waken not, stiff, frozen skin a tribute to what might have been. I wish I hadn't thrown the doll away when I needed her the most. It wasn't her fault she had to say that death was flying close. The morning found my mother dead, as the doll that I once found, forsaken and thrown on garbage bed, a trash heap burial mound. For many years, a lost Raggedy Ann, my doll must have searched the earth, until she found not a boy, but a man, and his lady who was giving birth. I had run so far from life that I had found a life anew. The doll gazed upon my beautiful wife and the child who now grew. The angel doll lay down softly, knowing her part had been played. The boy was gone, and though missed awfully, time's direction could not be swayed. I found her there, against hospital door, still and quiet as the dead. I scooped her up, and to her swore to fix her tattered threads. By my word, she was cured of the ills this world had shown. My baby girl brought in the world was gifted with a doll newly sewn. I will never make the mistakes that drove my mother to her grave, and the doll will never lie awake to take away your pain. I was in tears by the time I finished. Dad would have been 58 on the 1st of May. Jordan kept giving me these nervous glances, but he was respectful and didn't pry. "How much further, you think?" is all he asked. "There's a motel up ahead. Want to spend the night there?" These weren't pretty tears. They were big, snotty, sloppy globs. I was too choked up to answer, but he pulled into the parking lot anyway. He understood me so well, it was like he was made for me. I held the doll while I fell asleep in the motel. I knew I owed Jordan big for this. I felt so stupid for dragging us out here, but the letter and my cry had been cathartic, and I was so tired that I felt oddly at peace. It was the best I'd felt since the funeral, and who knows, maybe some freak tornado will hit the house and I'll know some part of Dad really is still out there watching over. Run away, or you will die tonight. It came from the doll, a small voice like a child who was afraid of being caught. I already did run away. I felt too guilty to wake Jordan up again after all this, so I whispered the reply. "Not far enough. He's still with you," she replied. I couldn't see the doll's mouth moving or anything, but there was nothing else which could have been talking to me. I looked over at Jordan's harmless sleeping body. Was I really going to trust a phantom voice over my husband who I've known and loved for years? But it wasn't just any voice. Somehow, it was my father trying to reach me, and him I would trust till the ends of the earth. I took the doll and my phone and quietly slipped out the door. I wasn't going to leave him stranded, so I took an UBER back home. While we were driving, I wrote him a long text message thanking him for being so understanding and apologizing for my behavior. I told him how much he meant to me, and that all of this was just because I was having such a hard time with Dad's passing. He was so kind that he probably wouldn't have even needed it, but it felt good to tell him anyway. I hope he got a chance to read it before he died. The next I woke, it was to the hammering of police on my front door. They informed me that my husband was found dead in his motel room with 3 bullet holes in his chest. Future investigations revealed the coke habit wasn't as ancient history as I thought. He owed a lot of money to the wrong people, and they followed our car to the motel. If it wasn't for the doll, I'd be dead too. I still think Dad was wrong about Jordan, though. I don't regret a minute of our time together. And Dad was wrong about another thing too. The angel doll was going to have to lie awake with me for a long time before she can take away the pain. I'm going to tell you a secret that I don't tell anyone. I'm a U.S. veteran of the war in Afghanistan. I was stationed in the Uruzgan province when Taliban militants attacked our coalition base. I stood next to a man I knew since training when a RPG-16 hit the 3-story building behind and buried us both alive, and I held the flag they sent home to his mother after I crawled out. I've tortured a man for information, threatened a child to coerce his parents to cooperate, and of the 7 people I know I've killed, only 5 were fighting back. But that isn't the secret, because I was just following orders. The secret is that when I'm lying awake at night thinking about all the things done to me, all the things I've done, I'm not traumatized by it all. The secret is I can't sleep because I miss it. Adrenaline, fear, excitement, it's all the same thing. I've been addicted to it for as long as I can remember. While other kids were riding skateboards around the neighborhood cul-de-sac, you'd find me grinding along the railings of a rooftop. They threw water balloons. I threw rocks. They learned to drive. I organized street races with my brother. By the time I graduated high school, I already had a juvie record for fighting. The cop sat me down with an Army recruitment officer, and they told me my life had only 2 possible outcomes left. You're going to either keep playing at these stupid stunts until you get locked up for life, or you're going to man up and become somebody. I told them I had changed, and the officer decided my past mistakes wouldn't disqualify me from enlisting. He was wrong for believing me. I just thought shooting guns sounded like a hell of a lot more fun than sitting behind bars. He was right that I would make a damn good soldier, though. Sure, it wasn't all excitement, but my life had a purpose, and I could finally put my natural affinity to good use. For the first time in my life, I was courageous instead of stupid, a hero instead of a freak. I didn't come home in a body bag like I had expected, but the wheelchair I got was even worse. The bullet between the 2nd and 3rd lumbar bones is still lodged in my spine, and that was it for me. I didn't know if I would ever get out of that chair, but even if I could, my days of living on the edge were over, and I hated it. I hated the Army for kicking me out. I would have crawled back into battle if they let me. I hated my brother for the pity he gave me. I hated the boring town I was stuck in, and more than anything, I hated myself for not having anything left to live for. I wheel out to the end of my driveway every month to get the disability check they mail me, but besides that, I just sit at home and watch movies, war movies, horror movies, anything that could make me forget, even for a moment, that the most excitement I was ever going to get was checkup time when the nurse leaned over my chair to measure my stagnant pulse. My brother tried to get me to go out with him more, but I couldn't stand being dragged away from my movies. I wish I could be inside them and never come out. That's when he came up with an idea for a compromise. How about you and I go down to the new virtual reality arcade? He asked. They've even got some immersive horror ones that are so real, you'll piss yourself. Sounds like my everyday life, I replied. I ended up going just to shut him up, and the place was actually a lot cooler than I expected. The arcade was divided into personal pods that looked kind of like spaceships. The assistant was a geeky Japanese dude and spoke with a weird inflection which kept swinging back and forth. He probably spent his spare time making fan-made anime dubs or some nonsense. He helped me get set up with the headset and headphones, and made sure the wheelchair didn't get tangled up in any of the wires. As you might have guessed from my introduction, not much impresses me. But holy shit, this technology has come a long way since the blurry 3D movies I saw as a kid. I found myself confronted with a menu hanging in the air, which looked real enough to touch. I selected the horror genre, and then a few more options came up. Select your difficulty. Are you a grandmother with a heart condition, kid with something to prove, SWAT team looking for practice, a lost soul seeking forgiveness from God? That last one didn't really sound like a degree of fear to me, but they were organized in ascending difficulty, so I selected that. Any hope of a thrill immediately disappeared as a fat cartoon devil with a pitchfork ran across my field of vision. "I can see you," he said, waving his pitchfork at me. "Can you see you?" "No, because I'm not a stupid cartoon. You sure this game is for adults?" I spoke aloud. "Just wait and see," the Japanese guy said. It was weird hearing him talk when I couldn't see him. I think he was still speaking, but his words were drowned out by the game music which started playing. It sounded like the bad haunted houses they try and push off on kids, full of rubber spiders, cobwebs, and jars of intestines, which are just spaghetti and meat sauce. My viewpoint was walking along a dark road at night which led to a trapdoor in the ground like a cellar. The cartoon devil popped up again, and I physically prepared myself for death by cringing. I get that my brother felt as helpless as I did, and I know he is just trying his best, which is still more than can be said for me. I guess it wouldn't hurt to at least pretend to have fun. Through me is the space between you and the divine. Infinite and eternal, inseparable and simultaneous. The devil said, his voice completely different than his last utterance. The words popped with a confusing static noise. It was almost as though instead of hearing the words, I heard every imaginable sound except the words, and my brain filled in the missing space just like it does with white lettering on black paper. "Are you scared yet?" I faintly heard my brother's voice through the headset. I shrugged and gave a thumbs up. The trapdoor opened, and I lurched in my chair, and something hurt in my back as the viewpoint suddenly dropped into the earth. It felt impressively real, almost like I was on a roller coaster which plunged into the darkness. I heard my brother laugh at my reaction. I figure that's enough satisfaction for him. No more looking startled, or I'll never hear the end of it. I could faintly see phosphorescent mushrooms and rocks lighting the deplorable descent. I was continuing to accelerate as I fell, and I even felt wind blowing in my face. They must have a fan or something to make it seem more real. The devil was tagging along with me, but he kept glitching and lagging and getting left behind, only to suddenly reappear in front once more. Then I felt a blast of hot air on my face, and I closed my eyes. Welp, guess this was it, folks. I must be in hell. I opened my eyes and squinted against the brilliant glare. I always imagined hell being darker. Was this hellfire? My eyes started to adjust, and I could see the sun reflecting sharply off the wide, sandy slopes of where? Afghanistan. Someone was talking behind me in Dari, the most common language used there. I couldn't understand it, but I could tell the person was afraid. I turned my chair to shift the viewpoint until I saw an old man kneeling in the dirt before 2 U.S. soldiers who had their backs to me. One of them was holding a picture of a teenage Afghani boy. "Do you know who this is? Have you seen him?" The first soldier asked. "Is this your idea of a joke, bro?" I spoke aloud. "Your brother went to use the bathroom," the Japanese guy said faintly. "What kind of game is this?" I asked, but his reply was drowned out by the VR soldiers. The old man kept pressing his face against the dirt and shaking his head. One of the soldiers dragged him to his feet and shoved the photo in his face. "You know who this is, don't you? Why are you trying to protect him? Do you know what he's done?" This wasn't funny to me. I started to take off the headset, but the cartoon devil appeared in the corner. "I can see you," he said in the silly voice. "Can you see you?" Everything was playing so smoothly, it could have been real, except for the devil, which kept lagging and glitching. He was little more than a jumping mass of miscolored pixels. One of the soldiers kicked the man on the ground. As he pivoted his body, I caught a glimpse of my own face under the helmet. Suddenly, I remembered who the old man was. Abdul-Basir was a Kalandar, or mystic, who was suspected of sheltering Taliban operatives in his house. I didn't need to watch to know what happened next. I took my headset off and handed it to the Japanese guy. "Did my brother put you up to this?" I asked him. "I can see you," the assistant replied. He handed the headset back to me, but I pushed it away. "No duh, Sherlock. How did you get this footage?" "Can you see you?" he asked. His face froze for a second while he spoke, twisted halfway between words. There were a couple of empty pixels obscuring his mouth, but I could tell he was smiling when he handed me back the headset. I touched his hand, warm and real. Well, I don't know what was going on, but this certainly captured my attention better than any movie. I slowly took the headset from him, and the assistant nodded and smiled while I put it back over my eyes. Ha 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 ha. The cartoon devil laughed in a good-natured way. "I played a trick on you, once, for what you've done." Flash. I was beating Abdul-Basir inside a holding cell. Flash. I was back in the desert next to the cartoon devil. I saw it for less than a second, like a single frame inserted into a movie. "Yeah, you tricked me all right," I answered. "But you didn't scare me. You think I don't remember everything I saw? I wasn't scared then, and I'm not scared now." The scene suddenly dissolved, and I was falling through the earth again. I seemed to be going deeper this time, because the tunnel was lit by flowing veins of lava now instead of mushrooms. I sat calmly in my chair, actually looking forward to what came next. I don't know if I was drugged or having a stroke, or if the devil really was trying to teach me a lesson, but I was excited to see just how far the rabbit hole went. This time, it was pitch black when I stopped. Crashed would be a better word, though, because I felt it. It was like my whole body had slammed into a wall. This trick could make me feel things. Could something here beat me or torture me? For a second, I actually did start to get scared, but then I reached out with my hands and felt carpet beneath my fingers. That's right. I was still in the VR arcade. I had just fallen out of my chair somehow. Still wearing the headset and seeing nothing but the blackness I landed in, I pulled myself hand over hand and crawled back into my wheelchair. "I can see you," the staticky absence of words said. "Can you see you?" The devil rose in front of me, but his appearance had changed as much from that cartoon devil as his voice had. The shape was dark, but it wasn't just like the lights were off. Ordinary dark is the absence of light, but the presence before me was the impossibility of it. In that moment before him, I couldn't even remember what it was like to see, but I could still sense his form through the emotional weight it carried. His horns were as sharp as being stabbed by the love of your life after you sacrificed everything to bring her joy. His face was the burden of holding your dying father in your arms, while both of you knew you could have saved him if only you tried harder. His body was the shape of a long life spent in quiet desperation after all living matter had wasted away, and you alone remained to dwell upon your regret. "Twice for who you are," the presence said. He reached out to touch me, but I couldn't let him. Somehow, I felt I would become like him, an unreal embodiment of misery and pain, if the presence of his being were to overlap with my own. It wasn't fear that made me rip off the headset. Fear is something consciously recognized in the brain. My terror was something much deeper and primitive, the sort of thing which stirred my ancient ancestors into action, to prolong their own purposeless existences in the face of some greater dread of the unknown. I tore off my headset and headphones and threw them into the assistant's face. My brother wasn't there, but I wasn't going to wait for him. I sprinted out of the building, bursting out into the bright, clear light of my familiar hometown. Boring? How could anything be boring about this place which brought me into this world and formed me into who I am? I ran as fast and hard as I could, taking in deep lungfuls of clean air which filled my body with hope and jubilation. I had my whole life ahead of me, and nothing I had done or been could ever change that. I couldn't remember the last time I felt this good. Hell, I couldn't even remember the last time I walked outside. And it hit me. I couldn't remember the last time I walked because I couldn't walk. I slowed down and looked at my legs pumping the concrete beneath me. I could feel the blood roaring in my veins and the pressure of my feet on the ground. But I could also see that one leg lagged slightly behind the other even when I stood still, and that it was filled with dead, blurry pixels. I walked the rest of the way home, just enjoying how good it felt to move and trying not to look at my glitching legs. 3 times for what you will do, said the voice which wasn't a voice. My brother was waiting for me in my home, although every instinct within me screamed with the common recognition that it wasn't my real brother. Oh, but I can't trick you, can I? His mouth moved, but it was the silly cartoon devil's voice which came out. You're not scared of anything. I reached up to my face, but the headset wasn't on anymore. I turned around and started walking upstairs as quickly as I could. My heart was pounding in my chest, like a caged animal trying to escape. My brother, who wasn't my brother, followed me up to my room. You think you're so strong, don't you, that you don't need anybody? But you know what? There's no one else here, so you can tell me the truth. The sing-song cartoon voice was grating on my nerves. Wherever I wasn't in control. There was no point in trying to outrun something in my own mind. I turned around to face him. I'm not afraid of you or your tricks. What do I have to do to get out of here? I asked. My voice didn't even shake. I balled my hands into fists, and they were firm and ready. Are you sure you want out? He asked, but it was back in my brother's voice. Your legs work in here, but they won't out there. I don't care, I want out, I said. Why? Unless you really are afraid. He smiled, and it froze in a glitch. The face was so warped I could barely recognize him. I couldn't stand to look. I wanted to wipe that smile off. If he wasn't going to be reasoned with, then I would have to do things my own way. I'm not afraid, I shouted. I grabbed him by the front of his shirt and punched him straight across the face. You're the one who is trapped in here with me. Then what do you feel? He asked. The face felt solid, and I could feel the bones of his jaw moving from the impact. The instant I hit him, however, his face was replaced with Abdul Basser. The old man started to pull a handgun from behind his back, but I punched him again, almost breaking my hand against his cheekbone. The face changed again, and this time I was looking into my own eyes. That was it. That was the way out. He was reeling from my blows, and I snatched the handgun from his limp grasp. That's not going to do anything to me. You're right, it won't, I interrupted, my mind racing with the possibilities, because you're just pretending to be me. It will, however, work on me. I put the gun in my mouth and pulled the trigger. He jumped at me faster than humanly possible, and knocked my hand aside. The gun went off with a deafening ring, and he fell to the ground in a heap. "My turn," I said. I put the gun in my mouth, pleased to find that my hand still wasn't shaking, and pulled the trigger. "I can see you. Can you see you?" I opened my eyes in the hospital. A doctor was leaning over me, shining a light in my mouth. My head hurt like hell. I tried to nod, but a searing pain engulfed my awareness and I froze up, almost like a glitch. My father was sitting beside my bed. He wouldn't say a word until after the doctor left, but eventually he told me what happened. I had entered some kind of fit at the VR arcade and fell out of my chair, probably caused by the bullet shifting in my spine. My brother took me home and stayed with me to make sure I was okay, but I pulled a gun and tried to kill myself. He managed to stop me, but the gun went off and hit him. I shot myself after that, but the bullet went straight through my jaw and missed my brain. I want to go back to my old life. Hell, I want to go all the way back to day one and do it all again, but I'd settle for just a day. I used to think I had nothing left to hope for. I used to think I wasn't afraid of anything. Now, I know I was wrong about both, and that they're both the same thing. The static sneer, half contempt, half agony, glitching across my father's face.
Watching my son Andrew kick the winning goal. That's my dream. Or catching his eye as he holds the science fair trophy, head held upright with the pride of our triumph. I still remember how my own father looked the night my high school football team won state. 2 of my teammates hoisted me onto their shoulders, and when Dad saw me, it was as though he forgave himself for every mistake he's ever made, all because he raised me into the man I had become. I don't care what Andrew decides to pursue in life. I just want him to be great at it. Isn't that what all fathers want? He's going to be 8 next month, and I know the next generation's best, his future competition, have already begun to refine their talents. Mozart began playing at 3, Picasso could draw before he could talk, and Michael Jackson was performing live by 6 years old. It's taken a while for Andrew to find his niche, but lately he started getting really into mountain and trick biking. His mother, Amy, thinks it's too dangerous, but I know how important it is to be passionate about your skill set, so I encourage him every chance I get. Amy just doesn't understand. She would see one little cut or bruise, and then suddenly, that's all that mattered. I say, if you aren't willing to bleed a little to achieve your dreams, then you don't deserve to have them come true. That's why we started practicing in secret. I'd tell Amy that we were just going to ride around the block. We'd both pedal until the house was out of sight. Then we'd blast off toward the hills, wearing the same conspiratorial grin. He was good too, fearlessly bouncing down cliffs and rocky slopes that would have even given me pause. Every day he came home a little stronger and a little more confident than the day before. Every day I knew it was worth all the exhaustion and sneaking around, because he was going to be the best, and I was going to be the one who made it happen. That is, until the day when it wasn't worth it anymore. We'd just gotten home from a trick competition at the skate park, although it was hardly fair since Andrew was still 8 and all the other kids were teenagers. Andrew slipped up while trying a nose wheelie and was disqualified before even getting to show off what he'd been practicing. We were both so frustrated, but I was still proud of him for not wasting any time and getting straight back to the hillside to practice. I could tell he wasn't being cautious this time. It was my fault for applauding and egging him on to tackle bigger boulders and obstacles. When you're disappointed, you can either give up or try harder. and I just didn't want my boy to quit. When he asked if I thought he could ramp off a rock to clear the ravine, I told him what I thought he needed to hear. "You can do anything you put your mind to," I said. We were wrong for believing in each other, I shouted when I saw his back tire slipping right before he made the jump, but it was already too late to do anything about. The bike pitched forward and hurled him straight over the handlebars, twisting the bike around on top of him as he flipped. Long before I heard the grotesque snapping of his impact, I knew he wasn't going to walk away from this all right. Maybe if I hadn't pushed him so hard, or so soon. Maybe if I hadn't allowed my own guilt and fear to make me hesitate before I plunged into the ravine after him, then maybe I could have saved him. It took a full 10 seconds of listening to his agonized groans before I could force myself to gaze down at what used to be my son. He'd landed directly on his head, but the helmet did nothing to prevent his neck twisting halfway around his body under the power of the impact. He'd been jarred so hard that part of his spine ruptured straight through his skin to greet the air with a bloody shine. Screw competing. If he even survived a trip to the hospital, then I'd still spend the rest of my life feeding him with a spoon. But this was my fault, and he was my son, so there could never be a choice. I took the first step of the never-ending journey down the slope toward him. "Let's go home, Dad." The words should have been enough to bring tears to my eyes, but instead I froze in the grip of absolute terror. It wasn't my son who said it. I didn't even know if my son could talk anymore. I turned slowly, careful not to lose my grip on the pebbled earth and topple helplessly down the ravine. "I'm okay, Dad. Let's go." Andrew, or at least someone who looked exactly like my son, all the way down to his freckles and the mustard stain on his sleeve, was waiting for me on the top of the hill. Back down the ravine, I still saw the twisted and broken version of the same boy lying there. "Come on," the unharmed Andrew said. "Race you back." He hopped on his bike and skidded fearlessly along the hillside. His speed and dexterity surpassed the old Andrew, even on his best days. As beautiful as it was, watching him fly over the rocks, the sight was impossible to appreciate with the wet gurgle of coughing blood sounding from further down. I had to make a choice, and judging by the amount of blood pooling on the rocks below, I had to make it fast. I could go down the treacherous slope and lift my son into my arms. I could drag him to the hospital, burning through my energy and savings in the vain fight toward a subnormal life. I could explain to Amy that I had lied to her, and that it was my fault that our life would never be the same. And if after all that Andrew was still to die, then I know she would leave me and I would have nothing left. "Don't worry, Dad. We're going to win next time. I promise." Or I could turn around and leave with what? Watching him race up and down the hills, the answer was obvious. I could turn around and leave with my son, and none of this will have ever happened. "I'll be right there," I said. "First one home gets ice cream for dinner." Climbing up the hill after Andrew. After my son, it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. It was abject relief to see his beaming face waiting for me at the top. The only hard part was when I had already lost sight of the ravine and was headed home, only to hear a voice dissipating on the wind behind me. "Please don't go. I need you, Dad." I gripped my son's hand, my new son, and held on tight all the way home. For the next few weeks, I wouldn't let Andrew out of my sight. I drove him to school instead of letting him take the bus. I picked him up for lunch. Then again, when school got out, taking him to his favorite places and spending all of my time helping him practice. I was trying my best to be a good father and trying even harder not to think about what that meant. I thought about going back to the ravine to at least bury the body, but every time I began to work up enough courage to face that broken corpse, my new son seemed to appear wanting to spend time with me. By the end of the first month, life had gone back to normal, and it was like nothing ever happened. The new Andrew was identical to the old, even sharing the same memories and habits and everything. By the second month, I'd even forgotten that horrible day ever passed, although sometimes the echo of those words being torn by the wind still slip into my brain as I lay down to sleep at night. I need you, Dad, but I was a good father. I did everything for my boy, and I knew he was going to repay me by becoming the best biker the world had ever seen. It wasn't until Andrew was 12 years old when I began to notice behavioral anomalies that I couldn't explain. But surely the real Andrew, I mean the old Andrew, he would have had his own changes by this age. I tried to tell myself that he was just starting to go through puberty, but even Amy began to feel that something wasn't right. Do you know what I caught Andrew doing last night? She told me one morning over breakfast. He's going to be a teenager soon. I'm sure I don't want to know. He was eating a bug, she declared. A big shiny cockroach, just munching it right up, looking as proud as a kitty cat who caught his first mouse. Then there was the rustling outside our window late at night. A dozen separate occasions I must have heard it, like someone was in the bushes watching us. Amy wanted me to check it out, but I just kept imagining Andrew running through the field like a wild creature, biting the heads off animals or digging up worms. I think I was happier not knowing. It wasn't just that either. Some nights we'd catch him awake at 4 in the morning, face an inch from the mirror, just staring at himself and giggling. Another time he had a butterfly knife, God knows where he got it, and was peeling away the skin on the back of his hand. He'd exposed a strip of bloody muscle and tendons running all the way from the tip of his finger, running halfway up his forearm. I took the knife away and demanded what he was doing, but all he said was, "Just curious what goes on under there, Dad." He grinned when he said Dad, stressing the word like it was our shared secret. Neither of us had ever mentioned that day on the hillside, but it felt like he not only remembered, but was actively using it to blackmail me. The worst was when he was trying to get something out of me, like when he decided he needed a laptop. I told him to wait for his birthday and turned to leave, but then he replied with, "Please don't go. I need you, Dad." Those words were burned into my subconscious like a trigger. Whenever he said it, I couldn't even look him in the eye. I'd just cave and give him what he wanted. It's not because he was the boss of me or anything. There's nothing wrong with me wanting to be a good father. All the while, he kept practicing with his bike. He was the best I'd ever seen, and anyone who saw him swore the same. He refused to participate in anything big because he wasn't ready yet. But he blew all the local competitions a new one. People started coming from miles around to watch him perform, and as soon as they found out I was his father, I'd have a dozen hands clapping me on my back or offering me a beer. "You must be so proud of him," they'd all say. Of course I am. He's my son. This coming weekend is going to be his biggest one yet. Some YouTube personality will be recording the whole thing, and I know the second the world sees what my boy can do, he'll be too big to ever put back in a box. I tried to warn him about how things will change after that, but he wouldn't listen to me. "Isn't this what you wanted?" he asked. He sat down on his bed, giving me a look of wide-eyed, blameless sincerity, as though he was a perfect angel sent here to bless my life. Bullshit act. "Don't pretend you know what I want," I told him. I was sick of that grin he always wore. "You go if you want to, but you're going alone. I don't want any part in this media circus." I turned to leave, trying to get out of his room quick enough before he said, "Please don't go. I need you, Dad." I don't know why, but that time it really got to me. It wasn't just a little kid trying to get away with something. This was an active taunt, manipulation of the highest degree. I thundered back around to face him, hoping to put my foot down and re-establish myself as the authority figure. "If I ever hear you say that again, I'm going to beat your ass until—" "Until what?" he interrupted. "Until I'm as broken as he was?" My breath caught as though someone had reached down my throat and grabbed it from the inside. He's never spoken of the other Andrew before. I'd hoped to God he never would. My hands involuntarily clenched into fists, so tight I could feel my muscles trembling all the way up my shoulders. It was never about me succeeding, was it? He asked, that arrogant grin spreading across his face. "You just wanted a little for yourself, didn't you? Only now the light's grown too bright and you're getting scared. I want you out of this house. Now." I've never spoken like that before in my life, so low it was closer to a growl than words. "You sure Mom agrees with you on that?" "Don't call her that. Get out. I want you gone." Throw away one son, and it's his fault. Andrew wasn't backing down. He was standing an inch from my face now. "Throw away too, and suddenly it's yours." I threw my fist at his face with everything I got. Maybe I could break his nose, or knock his teeth out. Maybe I could scar him up. Anything to make this imposter look less like my son. I hadn't realized just how strong he'd grown though, and when he swatted my fist away, it felt like the bones in my hand were rearranging themselves. "Don't be like that, Dad," he said. "You wanted me to be the best, didn't you?" I grunted through the pain and swung again. My eyes could barely follow the blur of his movements. He locked my outstretched arm against his side, and before I knew what was happening, he'd spun me around and slammed me into his closed door. I tasted blood, and my arm strained so bad against his pressure that it must be about to dislocate. I bit my tongue, trying not to scream. I couldn't let Amy know her son was a monster. "What do you want from me?" I had to spit and mumble to push the words through the bubbling blood and the pressed door frame. He let me go and laughed as I slid to the floor. "I'm not like you. I don't need anything from anyone. I just like being on your side of the world. Where I'm from, we don't have families like this." I strained for any sign that the words were changing as he spoke. I didn't want to look, but an irresistible urge forced my head to turn. I wanted him to be a monster, some horrible gray-skinned ghoul with tentacles, or a dozen gaping maws. Anything but what was there. Anything but that mockery of my son which grinned down at me. "What are you?" I asked. "Where are you from?" "Come with me this weekend," he said, "or I'll take you there." It was undeniably a threat. I don't know if he was a demon crawled up from hell, or some specter from a netherworld too horrible to contemplate, but lying there on the ground in a growing pool of my own blood, I finally understood how powerless my real son must have felt waiting for me. Rustle, like something in the bushes outside the window. Then Nunquam suade mihi vana, sunt mala quae libas, ipse venena bibas. The voice was coming from outside, sounding so familiar and so alien, like listening to your own voice through a recording. Andrew recoiled as though struck. He snarled, launching himself at the window. Finally, the illusion of his humanity was beginning to shed, and beneath the distorting fabric of his t-shirt, I could see the red blisters spreading. The creature roared as it smashed into the glass, but a brilliant light radiated from the panel and repelled it like an electrically charged fence. Exorcisamus te omni satanica potestas. I could just make out a hunched shape outside the window, but it was immediately obscured by another blinding flash of light which penetrated through the morphing creature. Boils the size of my head were swelling and rupturing down the length of its back. Black pus flowed freely down its sides. Again it slammed itself into the window, but this time it vanished straight through the portal without so much as cracking the glass behind. By the fading brilliance, and without the creature blocking my view, I saw the figure on the other side of the glass. Its back was as twisted and monstrous as the creature who had just been banished, and its face was unevenly stitched together with a network of scars, burns, and unsealed holes, which allowed me to see straight through his cheek and into his mouth. Through all the disfigurement and abuse, it was clear that nothing which has happened to him, nothing that could ever happen to him, could ever disguise the fact that he was my son. It was difficult to explain, and even more difficult for Amy to understand, but she confessed that she always felt something wasn't right and was relieved to finally have an answer. Andrew, my real boy, told us that the thing was called an irresanct, and they exist as powerless swarms of unresolved desires. Sometimes they will find their way to us through minute holes that exist between dimensions, although they remain harmless until they are given power by our acceptance of them. The irresanct cannot remain here long without taking a form, and even once they are accepted, they can only stay so long as they replace the void they left behind with someone from our side. When I took the creature home as my son, I gave it the strength to banish my true son to the other side, although the recounting of his journey there is another story altogether. The real Andrew had managed to return 4 months ago, watching us from the bushes and protecting us against the irresanct. When I asked why he didn't reveal himself sooner, he said he was waiting for the time when he knew I would accept him as my son. To come back to us after what I had done to him, after everything he's been through. Pride does not even begin to approach the admiration I feel for him. He wouldn't stay with us long though, saying there are more of the irresanct leaking through at an increasing rate. Barely a teenager and already deformed from his injuries and his trials spent on the other side, Andrew is going to keep fighting them. And he's going to be the best there ever was. I watched him go early this morning. I didn't want him to leave, but I know I had no right to speak the words in my heart. Please, don't go. I need you, son.